yanked me and she was like, this is like a learning moment. Do we need that in this moment? Like, no.
Right. Caitlyn Clark, right? Like, she's lighting things up. She's probably made more in NIL money or could potentially make more.
We saw you about to throw that, but I think it's just like kind of a learning process.
The money in the WNBA is non-existent.
Right.
Right? Like,
but she could change that.
In the high-stakes world of professional sports, the most consequential conversations rarely occur under the glare of arena lights. They do not happen in press conferences, where athletes recite sponsor-approved platitudes, nor do they occur during timeouts, where coaches scribble set plays on whiteboards. Instead, the fate of franchises is determined in spaces designed for opacity: corner offices overlooking practice facilities, private residences in affluent suburbs, and boardrooms where the language is not about pick-and-roll coverage or defensive rotations. It is a Tuesday morning in mid.
Your two Iowa teams left a mark on women's college basketball, but also women's basketball at large. Is that like kind of crazy to think about? Like, you were a part of something that was a catalyst for this like larger group.
I had heard about this Caitlyn Clark, and I was like watching videos of her just like having like 40 points.
September. The leaves in Indianapolis are just beginning to turn, but inside the corporate headquarters of Pacers Sports and Entertainment, the sprawling entity that governs the Indiana Fever, the atmosphere is decidedly more glacial than autumnal. The room is sparsely populated. There is no media presence. There are no agents present. No union representatives. The participants are a carefully curated cross-section of power. A representative from the Simon family's inner circle, the team's general manager, a high-ranking business operations executive, and the head coach. The agenda, as it was formally listed, pertained to strategic alignment and long-term asset management. But in reality, the conversation centered on a singular noun: a person. A player whose presence has fundamentally altered the economic geography of the franchise and, by extension, the league itself. Her name is Caitlyn Clark. What transpired in that room, if the cascade of whispers, fan investigations, and corroborating podcast analyses are to be believed, was not a coaching clinic. It was not a film session. It was a declaration of corporate intent. It was the moment a billion-dollar entity looked at its head coach and effectively stated, "This is not your team. This is her team. And if you cannot architect your system around that reality..."
Clark and Nafisa Collier were named WNBA All-Star captains for this year's WNBA All-Star Game. The captains were chosen via fan vote, and Caitlyn Clark received 1.29 million All-Star votes.
You are a liability. This is the story of that meeting. It is the story of how a 22-year-old guard from Iowa became the most valuable asset in the history of the WNBA, and how the people who signed the checks decided that protecting that asset was more important than protecting the coach's ego, the front office's vanity, or the sanctity of a balanced offensive scheme. It is a story about power. It is a story about money. And it is a story about what happens when a sport stops being just a sport and becomes a commodity. To understand the tension currently gripping the Indiana Fever, one must first understand the prelapsarian state of the WNBA's economic model. For 2 decades, the league operated under a specific, unspoken axiom. Women's basketball was a virtuous, meritocratic endeavor, but it was not a primary revenue driver. Franchises were valued in the millions, not the billions. Television ratings were respectable but niche. Sponsorship deals were structured around community goodwill rather than national market disruption. The phrase WNBA superstar carried cultural weight within the basketball ecosystem, but it rarely translated into the kind of economic leverage that forced ownership groups to alter their long-term strategies. Then came Caitlyn Clark. It is impossible to discuss the Fever's current corporate recalibration without acknowledging the statistical anomaly of Clark's arrival. Her rookie season was not merely good. It was economically transformative. The Fever's home attendance surged by over 260%. Their road games became de facto national events, with opposing teams moving venues to larger arenas to accommodate demand. Merchandise sales, specifically those adorned with Clark's name and number, experienced a growth curve that analysts described as exponential and unprecedented. But the most significant metric was invisible to the casual fan: broadcast inventory. The Fever were suddenly the darlings of the league's television partners. National windows that had historically been reserved for legacy dynasties like the Las Vegas Aces or Seattle Storm were reallocated to feature Indiana. The math was simple. Clark on screen meant higher Nielsen ratings. Higher ratings meant leverage in the next round of media rights negotiations. This is the context that the Simon...
And then she subbed me back in. There was a play where I kind of got a steal and like we're going in transition and Kelsey Mitchell just like takes off down the middle of the floor. And so there's like two people kind of by her and I literally like go to grab the ball.
Family Herb Simon, the 8-9-year-old patriarch of Pacers Sports and Entertainment, and his son Steve, who oversees the day-to-day strategic operations, was watching from their executive suites. They did not need to be basketball savants to recognize what was happening. They needed only to be businessmen. Clark was not just a player, she was a platform. She was the difference between the Fever being a tax write-off and the Fever being a capital A asset. And when you possess an asset of that magnitude, you do not treat it like a standard roster component. You do not allow it to be managed or contained or systematized into mediocrity. You insulate it. You feature it. You build a corporate identity around it. The question, of course, was whether the organization's basketball leadership understood this distinction. Stephanie White is not a novice. Her coaching resume is replete with achievements that command respect. A WNBA Finals appearance, a Big Ten championship, a National Coach of the Year award. Her basketball philosophy is rooted in the principles of spacing, ball movement, and collective responsibility. She does not believe in hero ball. She believes in connectivity. In a vacuum, this is a defensible, even admirable approach. The motion offense system White favors is designed to make defenses guard every player on the floor. It prevents stagnation. It fosters trust. It is the kind of system that wins championships when executed at a high level. However, the WNBA is not a vacuum. It is a competitive marketplace, and the Fever are no longer a rebuilding lottery team. They are a team with a singular resource that cannot be replicated. Caitlyn Clark's game is not defined by connectivity. It is defined by detonation. Her value proposition to the Fever and to the league at large is her ability to do things that no other player can do. The 3-0-foot pull-up, the no-look, cross-court dart, the audacious, almost arrogant confidence to take and make shots that would be categorized as poor decision-making in a coaching manual. This is the fundamental tension at the heart of the Fever's internal discord. White's system asks Clark to be a steward. The market demands that Clark be a spectacle.
Diana Taurasi got on the mic and she said these things about Clark after. It kind of, I don't know if it's going to change the viewpoint of Caitlyn Clark from a lot of these old bitter, all these old bitter Bettys that are still in.
For the first half of the season, this tension manifested in subtle, almost imperceptible ways. The pace of the offense slowed. The volume of Clark's deep-range attempts dipped. The chaotic, exhilarating transition game that defined her collegiate career was replaced by a more methodical, half-court approach. To the untrained eye, it looked like development. To the trained eye, and more importantly, to the business operations team, it looked like dilution. The viral clip that became a Rorschach test for this conflict occurred during a tightly contested game in late July. Clark, having committed 2 consecutive turnovers, was pulled from the floor. As she sat on the bench, a play unfolded in transition. Kelsey Mitchell, the team's veteran guard, streaked down the middle of the lane, wide open. Clark, watching from the sideline, physically lunged forward, her hands gripping an imaginary ball, her body language screaming the intention to deliver a pass that never came. Later, in a post-game reflection, Clark described the moment with deliberate diplomacy. "I think it's just like kind of a learning process." But the subtext was deafening. Why was she on the bench? Why was the most creative passer in the world not empowered to make that read? Why did the system seem to be suppressing the very instincts that made her transcendent? These questions did not originate in the Fever's film room. They originated in the Fever's business office. They originated in the living rooms of the Simon family. They originated in the boardrooms of ESPN and Amazon and Nike, where executives were asking a much simpler, much more financially significant question: why aren't we getting as many highlight reel clips as we were in May? The specifics of the alleged closed-door meeting remain officially unconfirmed. This is important to state clearly. No press release was issued. No public statements were made. The Fever's communications department has maintained a disciplined silence regarding any internal discussions involving ownership, coaching, and personnel alignment. However, the absence of official confirmation does not equate to the absence of truth. In the modern sports media ecosystem, information travels not through official channels but through osmotic pressure. It leaks through
understand how hard it was for me to not throw that. And she's like, oh, I know, trust me. Everybody was like, we saw you about to throw that. But I think it's just like kind of a learning process.
This clip bothered me because if you watch that play where she didn't pass Kelsey the ball after Coach Stephanie White benched her for having a few turnovers in a row.
Agents who speak to reporters on background. It leaks through front office assistants who overhear tense phone calls. It leaks through the coded language used by broadcasters who are suddenly choosing their words with unusual precision. The consensus narrative, pieced together from fan forums, independent podcast investigations, and the careful analysis of behavioral shifts, is as follows. Approximately 6 to 8 weeks into the season, following a stretch of games where the Fever's offensive rhythm appeared visibly constrained, a high-level strategy session was convened. Present were representatives of the Simon family ownership group, likely including Steve Simon, who has increasingly taken the lead on operational matters. His presence signals the escalation of the issue from basketball problem to corporate problem. Front office leadership, specifically Amber Cox, general manager, and Kelly Krauskopf, a senior executive with deep ties to the franchise. These individuals serve as the bridge between the coaching staff's competitive needs and ownership's financial expectations. Stephanie White, the head coach, tasked with defending her system and her authority over on-court decision-making. The alleged content of this meeting has been described by multiple independent sources using remarkably similar language. The mandate. According to the prevailing theory, the message delivered by ownership was unambiguous. It was not a suggestion. It was not a request for consideration. It was a directive. Caitlyn Clark is the franchise. Everything else is secondary. The offense must be constructed to maximize her strengths. The identity of the team must be calibrated to amplify her visibility. If there is a conflict between the correct basketball play and the Caitlyn Clark play, you default to the Caitlyn Clark play. For a coach of Stephanie White's pedigree, this directive was not merely an adjustment. It was an indictment. It suggested that her system, her judgment, and her prioritization of balance were actively harming the franchise's most valuable resource. It suggested that her authority was subordinate to the commercial interests of the ownership group. The rumor mill alleges that White did not acquiesce quietly. It alleges that she argued passionately, intellectually, for the integrity of her system. She pointed to the team's improving record. She highlighted the development of supporting players. She pushed back against the notion that basketball success and commercial success were mutually exclusive. And, according to the most aggressive version of the rumor, the ownership response was a masterclass in corporate finality. We hear you. We respect you. But this is not a debate. This is the direction. If you cannot execute it, we will find someone who can. If the meeting occurred as alleged, its aftermath has been characterized by a peculiar form of political warfare, the war of implication. Stephanie White is too experienced, too savvy to engage in open defiance. She has not publicly criticized the front office. She has not benched Clark in retribution. She has not done anything overtly insubordinate. Instead, her resistance has manifested in the spaces between her words. In press conferences following the alleged meeting, White has consistently and pointedly emphasized the contributions of other players. She has praised Kelsey Mitchell's scoring prowess with an almost theatrical intensity. She has spoken at length about the need for multiple threats and shared responsibility. She has framed the team's success as a collective endeavor, subtly pushing back against the narrative that the Fever are, or should be, a one-woman show. To the untrained listener, this is standard coaching vernacular. To the trained listener, and to the ownership group monitoring the message, it reads as a quiet refusal to fully embrace the mandate. Meanwhile, on the court, the evolution has been gradual but perceptible. Clark's usage rate has ticked upward. The transition opportunities have increased. The deep range attempts are slowly returning to baseline. It is not the full unfettered explosion of her Iowa days, but it is a measurable loosening of the constraints. Was this White adapting to the directive, or was it the natural progression of a rookie finding her footing? The beauty of this ambiguity is that it allows all parties to claim victory. White can point to the improved results and assert that her system is working. Ownership can look at the rising highlight volume and feel that their intervention was effective. But the underlying tension has not dissipated. It has merely been driven underground, where it festers. To frame this conflict as merely a clash of egos, a stubborn coach versus a meddlesome billionaire, is to fundamentally misunderstand the mechanics of modern sports ownership. Herb Simon did not purchase the Indiana Pacers, and by extension, the Fever, to indulge his passion for basketball tactics. He purchased them as business assets. The Simon family's wealth is derived from retail real estate shopping malls, commercial centers, physical infrastructure. This is an industry that has been under existential assault for 2 decades. The rise of e-commerce, the consolidation of brick-and-mortar retail, the shifting habits of American consumers. These are the threats that keep the Simon family up at night. The Indiana Fever are not their primary business. But in a portfolio increasingly challenged by macroeconomic headwinds, the Fever represents something rare, asymmetric upside. Clark's arrival did not just improve the team's win-loss record, it diversified the family's revenue streams. It created a new, high-growth asset class within a legacy organization. It provided exposure to a younger, more diverse, more culturally influential demographic than the traditional Pacers fan base. This is the context that makes the alleged intervention not only logical but inevitable. When you have an asset that is generating 260% attendance growth, exponential merchandise velocity, and national broadcast prioritization, you do not delegate its management exclusively to a basketball coach. You centralize it. You elevate it to the C-suite. From ownership's perspective, White's resistance was not about philosophy. It was about risk management. Every game where Clark was underutilized was a missed opportunity to convert casual viewers into loyal fans. Every half-court possession that ended in a routine pass, rather than a spectacular shot, was a failure to generate the social media engagement that drives modern fandom. The mandate, then, was not an act of aggression. It was an act of fiduciary responsibility. The Fever's internal recalibration is not occurring in isolation. It is a symptom of a much larger transformation within the WNBA, a transformation for which Caitlyn Clark is both the catalyst and the avatar. For years, the league's economic model was defined by parity and collectivism. Superstars existed, but they were rarely granted the kind of organizational deference that is routine in the NBA. There was an unspoken belief that the WNBA product was bigger than any individual player, that the team was the brand. That excessive focus on any single athlete risked alienating the broader base. Clark has rendered that belief obsolete. Her individual popularity has transcended the league itself. She has become a cultural figure in the way that only generational talents do, a name recognized by people who do not watch basketball, a jersey purchased by children who cannot yet dribble. This is not a dynamic that the WNBA can control or suppress. It is a force of nature, and it has created a precedent that will affect every franchise, every player, and every negotiation moving forward. What happened in Indiana is being watched closely by other ownership groups. If the Fever succeed, if their investment in Clark as franchise cornerstone yields a championship and sustained financial growth, it will accelerate the arms race for transcendent talent. It will validate the strategy of building the organization around the individual rather than the system. Conversely, if the Fever implode, if the power struggle destabilizes the locker room and drives away key personnel, it will serve as a cautionary tale. But even that cautionary tale will reinforce the central thesis. Caitlyn Clark is powerful enough to make or break a franchise. Amidst the corporate maneuvering and the philosophical debates and the speculation about power dynamics, there is a danger of forgetting the human being at the center of it all. Caitlyn Clark is 22 years old. She is, by all accounts, a competitor of singular intensity. She does not want to be coddled. She does not want to be weaponized as a cudgel in a power struggle between her coach and her ownership group. She wants to win basketball games, but she is not naive. She understands the economics of her position. She understands that her NIL valuation, which exceeded $3 million before she ever played a professional minute, was not based solely on her basketball talent. It was based on her marketability, her visibility, her capacity to command attention. She also understands the politics. When she received 1.29 million All-Star votes, far outpacing established veterans and fellow rookies alike, she understood that it was not merely a validation of her performance. It was a message from the fan base. We are watching because of you. We are investing because of you. Do not let them diminish you. Her public statements have been meticulously neutral. She praises her coach. She credits her teammates. She deflects questions about her usage rate with platitudes about winning basketball. It is a masterclass in media training. But the body language tells a different story. The frustration on the bench. The visible disappointment after losses where she felt she could have done more. The subtle, almost imperceptible eye rolls when questions imply that she needs to be managed. Clark is not a passive participant in this drama. She is its engine. And how she navigates the coming months, whether she continues to defer to authority or begins to assert her own agency, will determine the trajectory of her career and, by extension, the trajectory of the franchise. The NBA and WNBA are not patient institutions. The memory of ownership is long, but the tolerance for misalignment is short. If the allegations regarding the closed-door meeting are accurate, Stephanie White is now coaching on borrowed time. Not because she is incompetent, she is demonstrably not, but because she represents a philosophical obstacle to the ownership group's strategic vision. There are three potential resolutions to this conflict. Scenario A, the reconciliation. White fully embraces the mandate. She redesigns her offensive system to feature Clark as the unambiguous primary option. She publicly champions Clark's candidacy for MVP. She becomes the avatar of the build-around Caitlyn strategy. The tension dissipates, and the Fever emerge as a legitimate contender. This is the optimal outcome, but it requires White to swallow her pride and abandon aspects of her coaching identity. History suggests this is difficult for competitive personalities. Scenario B, the Cold War. White maintains her philosophical position but makes tactical concessions. The offense evolves incrementally, avoiding direct confrontation while subtly preserving her core principles. The tension becomes a permanent, low-grade hum in the background of the franchise. This is sustainable in the short term, but it erodes trust and creates an unstable foundation for long-term success. Eventually, one side will force a resolution. Scenario C, the regime change. Ownership determines that the philosophical divide is unbridgeable. White is relieved of her duties, either at the end of the season or, in a more dramatic scenario, mid-season. An interim coach is installed, likely someone aligned with the front office's vision, and the search begins for a permanent replacement who explicitly accepts the Clark-centric mandate. This is the nuclear option, but it is far from unprecedented in professional sports. The prevailing wisdom among league insiders leans towards Scenario C. The Simons did not acquire a generational asset to watch it be mismanaged by a coach whose system does not maximize it. They have the resources, the leverage, and the institutional will to make a change if they deem it necessary. The only question is timing. One of the most fascinating subplots of this saga is the role played by the fan base. In the absence of official information, Fever supporters have transformed themselves into amateur investigators. They parse every post-game quote for subtext. They analyze shot charts to identify patterns of suppression. They amplify rumors from credible sources and dissect the credibility of podcasters who claim to have inside access. This is not passive fandom. It is active intelligence gathering. The catalyst for this behavior is trust, or, more accurately, the erosion of trust. Fans watched the Fever transform from a laughingstock into a national phenomenon, and they credit Clark for that transformation. When they see the offense stagnate, they do not assume it is a strategic adjustment. They assume it is a sabotage. This paranoia is not entirely irrational. The history of sports is replete with examples of organizations failing to recognize the talent in their midst, or actively suppressing it in favor of lesser but more system-compliant players. Fans have been conditioned to see conspiracy in competence gaps. The viral success of channels like Courtside Leaks is a direct response to this information vacuum. They provide a narrative framework for fans who sense that something is wrong but lack the vocabulary or access to articulate it. They validate the suspicion that there is a hidden drama unfolding beneath the sanitized surface of official team communications. Whether these channels are accurate or speculative is, in some ways, irrelevant. They have become the primary vehicle for the story of the Fever's internal power struggle. They have set the terms of the debate, and they have made it impossible for the organization to dismiss the rumors as baseless internet chatter. Every generation of athletes produces a player who redefines the parameters of their sport. Michael Jordan redefined the economics of athlete marketing. LeBron James redefined player agency and career management. Serena Williams redefined the intersection of athletic dominance and cultural influence. Caitlyn Clark has the potential to be that figure for the WNBA. But potential is not destiny. It requires alignment. It requires an organization willing to subordinate its institutional preferences to the needs of the individual. It requires a coach willing to design a system that amplifies eccentricity rather than sanding it down. It requires an ownership group willing to invest aggressively in the surrounding talent. The Fever are currently in the process of deciding whether they are capable of providing that alignment. The alleged meeting was not an endpoint. It was an inflection point. It was the moment the organization acknowledged that the old ways of operating were insufficient for the new reality. What happens next will determine not only the fate of Stephanie White or the Fever's playoff positioning, it will determine whether the Caitlyn Clark era is remembered as a golden age of Indiana basketball or as a cautionary tale about the failure of institutional imagination. As of this writing, the Fever's front office remains silent. Stephanie White continues to coach. Caitlyn Clark continues to play. The team continues to win or lose based on factors that are, ostensibly, limited to basketball. But the tectonic plates have shifted. The power dynamic has been permanently altered. Everyone in the organization now knows that the highest levels of ownership are actively monitoring the deployment of the team's most valuable asset. Everyone knows that the mandate exists, even if they cannot cite its exact wording. Everyone knows that the coach is on probation, whether she acknowledges it or not. The silence is not peace. It is preparation. And when the next conflict arises, when the offense stagnates again, when Clark looks frustrated again, when a crucial game slips away in the fourth quarter, that silence will shatter. The questions that are currently whispered will be shouted. The rumors that are currently confined to fan forums will be confirmed by official sources. Until then, the basketball world watches. We watch the shot charts and the usage rates and the body language. We watch the press conferences for coded language and micro-expressions. We watch the ownership suite for signs of impatience. We watch Caitlyn Clark, the engine of it all, as she carries the weight of a franchise, a league, and an economic revolution on her shoulders. She never asked for any of this. She just wanted to play basketball. But in the modern sports economy, playing basketball is never just playing basketball. It is commerce. It is power. It is legacy. And the fight over who controls that legacy has only just begun.